You are now listening to the Building with AI Promises and Heartbreaks podcast, brought to you by Solid.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Building with AI Promises and Heartbreaks. Today, I have Glen McCracken with me. Glen is the Chief Product and Technology Officer at Lantum, a health tech scale-up transforming how the NHS in the UK and other healthcare providers manage their workforce. With nearly 30 years experience across consulting, digital transformation, data and AI, Glen has built and led global teams, delivered multi-million-dollar programs, and advised boards on how to scale with technology. He's a contrarian voice in the AI space, challenging hype while showing organizations can achieve real outcomes. And I will add one thing that's not in this intro, is that he's a fantastic person to follow on LinkedIn. He is contrarian. He makes the best cartoons. You're just like, you don't even before you read anything, you're like, oh, I get what he's about to talk about. And really, I highly recommend following Glen on LinkedIn. And I'm super excited to have Glen here with me. So Glen, hello. Great to have you here.
Hello, Yoni. Hey, thanks for having me. This should be a fun 45 minutes or so.
Yes, I was looking forward to this one on this nice Friday here. So let's go straight into it. You know, a lot of your posts are about AI adoption, reality versus hype. Let's start going straight into that. Do share your thoughts.
Yeah, I think AI is fascinating. I describe it as overhyped and underestimated. So there's so much hype around it, especially with the emerging elements of AI, whether it be generative AI, LLMs, or agentic AI, which is all the rage at the moment. I mean, I've been using AI for more than 25 years, traditional AI. So back in the 90s, back in the good old days, I did a statistics degree. I was lucky enough to work with Ross Ehaka and Robert Gentleman, who created R. And so I worked on R at the kind of in the pre-release stage, which was quite fun. When I started in my consulting career, we used R to do forestry valuation models based on aerial photographs of trees, which was pretty exciting. We used support vector regression for that. We did spam filters using basic classifications. We did ARIMA, which is a form of kind of moving average or order regression to do predictions. We did health funding models. We did all these things while it was still being called statistics. And then we saw things kind of evolve in the 2000s to be data science, which is far sexier than statistics. And it became a little bit more popular. And then really with the advent with GPT coming along and kind of commoditizing everyone's understanding of what is AI and how can I use it, we've just seen this phenomenal explosion in both the noise around AI and the application. And then the inevitable snake oil salesman's kind of come to the surface as well. Obviously got tired of Web 3.0 and crypto, so they decided to try out AI. But yeah, it is. There's a lot of noise, and I think noise is great. Like hype is fantastic. Hype creates attention. It gets people talking. It gets boards asking the question, which is the real question. Hopefully, the boards are asking are things like, how can we be doing this better? Is there a more operational, efficient way that we can do this? Unfortunately, in the short term, a lot of what the boards and senior management were doing were, how do we shove AI into our business processes, or how do we shove AI into our organization? So a solution in search of a problem, or a hammer in search of a nail. There's a great quote from Maslow that says, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yep.
Yeah, so we've seen a little bit of that. And then the disadvantage of that hype and the solution in search of a problem is that you kind of get the kickback when things don't work. And you see the MIT study saying 95% of Gen AI pilots fail. And you kind of get this really interesting situation where the industry as a whole is at risk of thinking that AI is not a good thing and not a real thing and doesn't provide all the benefits that many people know that it does. And that's kind of my concern. So I do like to point out kind of hype versus reality quite a lot as a way of putting a bit more sunlight on the area to make it clear where there are phenomenal use cases for AI, and AI for decades has done an amazing job in doing that. And there's some emerging use cases for generative AI and LLMs, which are just incredible. But yeah, you do need to tell the difference between the hype versus the reality.
Yeah, and there's one of your very recent posts was about the noise machine and how there's noise everywhere. Somebody I spoke with recently also said, this is insane FOMO because how there's this thing on Instagram, right, where everyone's life is so pretty and everyone's eating the best food and everyone's vacationing at the most amazing places. And you find yourself sitting there and being like, hey, my life's not that amazing. My life is not like in the Caribbean eating lobsters and, whatever. It's not what I do every day. Every day I wake up in the morning and I feed my kids and I work and I get on Zoom calls. And so that that FOMO of Instagram feels like it's coming into LinkedIn and AI, and every leader is saying, wait, my AI is not that amazing. My AI is not like, my organization's not completely using AI. Like, am I wrong? Am I living the wrong life here? Am I doing it the wrong way? Am I in the wrong company? Is my company approaching this the wrong way? And I think that person I spoke with is like, well, just like we're feeling that on Instagram, we should all maybe stop for a moment and say, well, the stuff we see on LinkedIn where everyone has these amazing demos and everything's working amazingly, we should all like tone it down and put it in the right perspective. And your point about the noise machine is humming away, and there's noise everywhere. Vendors are exaggerating the capabilities. Analysts are inventing new categories. Consultants are telling you that you're already behind, and so you need a rush. You need to make your life more pretty and more beautiful, and you need to, lose 20 kilos and do all that stuff, just like with Instagram. So imagine the listener is someone who's under that pressure, seeing all this stuff on LinkedIn. The board is telling them we need more AI. They're seeing all this noise. Help them navigate the situation. What should they do?
Yeah, I think there are almost there are two types of projects. So there are push projects and pull projects. So as an organization, there are the types of projects where a central group, whether it be IT or the board or senior management, want to push something onto the organization because they think it's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Those projects are really hard and invariably will fail. And then there are the pull projects where the business is aware of the fact that they have a problem, they have pain, and they want help in resolving that pain. And they're trying to pull the central resources or central teams in to help them alleviate that pain. And I suppose the starting point is to move so typically organizations are what you could classify as subconsciously incompetent. So they don't actually know what they don't know. And the great thing about AI literacy programs and just people playing around and having a little bit of fun with these kind of domestic GPT tools and other LLMs is that you move from being subconsciously incompetent to being consciously incompetent. So you then realize that, oh, wow, there are better ways of doing things. I could use the spreadsheet, but I know there's a better way. I've played around with N8N or Make.com or any of these other tools. And now I know that there is a way of automating these repetitive type activities. Or I've played around with GPT and I crudely understand that there's such thing as an LLM. And I know that I can put large amounts of unstructured information and it can summarize it, or it can theme it, or it can look for specific quotes. So I now know that there's a way that I can take copious amounts of large files and make sense of them. And the great thing then is you've got people in the organization that are saying, I know I can do this with some of these kind of B2C type tools. Is there a way that you could resolve some of my pain by using the same types of tools? And so then you get people thinking in terms of, I have seen some solutions that are probably fungible enough that they could be also used within an organization. Who can help me with that? And the best ideas that I've ever seen are from the front line, not from consultants. I mean, consultants, and I was a consultant for many years, so consultants will come in and look around and they'll tell you things that you already know, which is a good thing. So they often consolidate the information, talk to people that haven't always been spoken to, rationalize it down, summarize it, look for some of the root causes and common themes, and then make it in some sort of palatable format where it's easier to recognize that you need to take action. But all organizations can do that. So if you empower the staff to play around with different tools, put in some AI literacy type programs, then in a very short space of time, people will start looking for these pull projects. They'll say, hey, I've experimented with this at home. I know that I've set up some rules so that when my kids email me, it sends me a text. It's like a basic automation rule. Or there was a tenancy agreement that was sent through and I got GPT to review it. Is there something we could do that's a little bit more secure and protects the IP and everything in the business setting? Because I get contracts all the time, but it's hard for me to identify the deltas and it normally takes me like 4 or 5 hours. Is there a way that we could do a project on that just identifies what are the key changes from the previous version of the contract and just redlines it so I know what to check? And so if you have the starting point of moving people to being kind of consciously incompetent, so consciously knowing where they could be doing things better because they've had a teaser as to how AI could be used, then you've already got what I like to call the coalition of the willing. You've already got the buy-in from the people that want to resolve their pain, and they'll give you whatever support you need. And so that would be my recommendation. So empower the people, let them eat cake, and then let them understand how the tools can be used so that when you are ready to kick off some projects, you can go to them and say, you've probably got some ideas. What are those ideas and what can we help you with? As opposed to we've sat in a room for a few days and we've come up with the top 3 use cases we want to force upon the business. And so we need a hand with the sledgehammer to hammer the AI nail into your business unit. Who's in?
Okay, so a few things. First of all, resist the push from the top down, right? The top down will come to you and say, we need to do more AI. We need to do more AI. You need to figure out how to manage upwards and, tell them, yes, we're working on it, or whatever you need to do in order to not necessarily listen to the push and focus more on the pull. Look at the business and see what the business is asking. The business might be asking for AI, but it might be asking for other things that could be solved through AI. So there's resist the urge to listen to the push, focus way more on the pull, the people on the front lines, the business people themselves running the business on a day-to-day basis. That's one thing that you said. Another thing is play around with it. And play around with it even in your personal setting, right? In at home, use ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you want to use, but play around with it because it's going to give you that for a bit of what's possible here and encourage people to do it. So whether it's the person listening here to the podcast themselves doing it or encouraging other people in the organization, tell them, hey, play around with this thing. And I think this is maybe a point you're making. When you're playing around with it on a personal basis, there are a lot less constraints. Like there's a lot less security and confidential information and things like that. So yes, you can have it connect to your Gmail and respond and do things with your kids' email that are coming in. And you can upload to it all kinds of agreements because it's your personal agreements. How much is ChatGPT going to be learning off of that? So it reduces the barrier for them to play with it, and then they play with it, and then they can get a feel. And to your point, they become consciously incompetent because now they're like, okay, now I can understand on the one hand what the business needs because they're pulling it. On the other hand, what is possible, and then I can start connecting the dots. Versus the other way of, I was told we need to do AI. Let's sit in a meeting, figure out what we can do with AI, and then go and do it. And that results in 95% failure per that report finding.
Exactly. And the other thing is that people in the organization, like most people, are pretty proactive and they want to play around with these tools. So most people, even if you don't have an AI policy, I can tell you right now, most organizations, people are running around using these tools. They're using them in a manner that's not secure. It doesn't protect your IP. It's dark IT. So there is so every organization should have some sort of an outlet whereby people can do it properly. So it's great that they can kind of play with it. But if you're not proactively kind of saying, we've got the facility to do these types of things and we want to do them properly, then people just build their own little toys that potentially leaves you a little bit exposed. So yeah, it's definitely worth your while. And as you described, if you think about the kind of the failure rates, so my kind of take on failure rates is I've never worked ever on an AI project where the technology failed. Ever. The technology's never failed. The politics have, the people have, the change management have, the pushback, all of the kind of people elements, that's the hard part. That's where it fails, just like any large kind of transformational technology project. So if you start with the people that are feeling the pain and saying, what can we do to help you? Like, we want to provide some solutions. We want to help you. Why don't you propose a list? Why don't you let us know where your biggest pain points are so that we can do something in a relatively kind of small, manageable, ring-fenced way to prove that we can actually do this and do it really well. And instantly you're getting two things. One is you're getting the cold face, what is the actual pain being experienced? And you're getting the buy-in from the people because they're going to say, this is fantastic. I've been using some hacky little tools in the background that are okay. I'd love to scale it more. I'd love it to be official and legitimate and protect the company's interest and other such things as well. I'm in. Like, how can I help? So you're much more likely to get kind of this coalition of the willing, the people that are all in and want to make sure it succeeds if you start with those right type of use cases.
That buy-in part is really important. A lot of people are thinking, okay, AI is here to replace me, to take my job away. There was a post I read a couple of days ago about a guy in the tech and startup space, and there's a lot of AI bots now that do what's called SDR work. And for those listening, it's basically the work where you have junior salespeople reaching out to potential customers or clients over LinkedIn or email or whatever. Been always very manual, very painful. Now there are all these bots that are automating it. And his post was about the fact that he and one of his startups, they brought in these AI bots in, and the people in the company, the SDRs, immediately said, oh, this thing is going to replace me. Oh my God, where's my future? What's going to happen? And this is obviously a fear that's happening a lot in the industry. So when you're talking about the buy-in, so there's the buy-in around the solution. Does that buy-in also deal with people's fear of getting replaced by it? Or is there something else that you need to do on top of that?
Yeah, I think part of it is. So I think when something is happening to you and you feel like you don't have a lot of control over it, and the project was kind of defined away from you, then there's naturally going to be more fear, uncertainty, and doubt associated with what is actually going on and what are the reasons for it. If you're kind of involved in the specifying, what are we going to do? What are some of the ideas? What are some of the critical kind of use cases that we perceive it could be of value? Then you're going to be more involved and more engaged and feel like you're part of the solution as opposed to the solution happening to you. I think you're absolutely right to flag, like SDRs, there's a number of roles where a high proportion of the tasks are highly repetitive. And if you think about tasks, you've kind of got the application of business rules, and then you kind of have the discernment. So you've got the logic stuff, which you can turn into if then else statements, glorified if then else statements. And then you've got the human element where you're making kind of determinations based on that information. And at the moment, so we know AI historically has been really good at the if then else, and it's getting progressively better. Like some of the agents, although not all the agents you're seeing at the moment are actually agents. They're kind of glorified wrappers around LLMs. But increasingly, you're right. Some of those tasks within some of the roles do lend themselves for automation. That doesn't necessarily mean that the role is replaced. It certainly lends itself to the fact that some of the highly repetitive tasks are going to be replaced. And typically what happens in robotic process automation or intelligent automation field is that you see that people get pushed up the value chain. So for many years now, so Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, UiPath have been doing really kind of desktop emulation and kind of these if then else automations where if the rules are reasonably well defined, then a bot can make most of the determinations, not all, but most. And no, I don't know, so I'll escalate. And what you find over time with those types of automation projects is that the people that were involved, that were doing a lot of the repetitive manual work, get pushed into more of the exception handling. So they're dealing more with the outliers or the use cases or support calls or SDR ones that can't be dealt with via the robot. And in the automation field, they often say that automation is all about taking the robot out of the human. So it's taking those highly repetitive activities out of the human.
That.
And you're right about the SDR. So there's lots of activities. If you think about a traditional sales funnel where you're doing some demand generation, you're doing all sorts of kind of A/B testing, you're experimenting with marketing copy and even experimenting with the types of clients you want to go after, there's a plethora of tools now available. Like you've got Clay and ZoomInfo and Cognizant. There's a whole bunch of these phenomenal tools that allow you to target specific kind of nuances that you perceive a part of that kind of ideal consumer profile. And then you can hyper-personalize that message in a way that hopefully will resonate, that will have a much higher click-through rate on those types of campaigns. And then now that you've kind of got them in the top of that funnel, there's traditionally you've done a lot of lead scoring, and you'll kind of funnel them through to, do I want to put it to a human, or do I want to better pre-qualify them? Do I want to push them down like a demo or a sign up here or a download this? Or do I want to put them straight to an end, a real human, because I perceive that the sales value of it could actually be quite high. And now what you're finding, just like you described, is the SDR kind of agents that are being put in place are automating a lot of that volume of activity, but there still is a need for the humans to be involved, at least at this stage, to help, in some cases, further qualify the prospect itself, or also in the sales process as well. So whilst there's lots of kind of multimodal where you can text and email and even have voice calls going out, I think there's still a little pushback from people saying, I like the idea of interacting with someone and knowing that I've got like a kind of a personal connection if I'm going to be spending $100, $200, $300, or even $10,000. So yeah, it's definitely changing. But I think the kind of the hype that we're hearing around widespread replacement of certain roles is still some time away.
Yeah, yeah. We use a tool called Ample Market that does some of that SDR automation, and to me, it's magical because we basically say, okay, here are the people you need to chase, and it just figures out because it knows the pitch for solid. It looks at these people and says, oh, I think this person would respond best to this story, and then crafts the emails and everything, and then gets approval and sends it out. And it just saves so much time. And it doesn't just save time, it drastically increases the response rate because SDRs, humans, at some point they're like, I can't work on the next email. Like I can't now tailor this email to Yoni and this email to Glenn. Like people get tired. And that drives a reduction in their performance because if they would tailor every single email and every single LinkedIn and every single call to every person that they're focused on, they would probably get pretty good results. But people get tired and AI doesn't get tired. So AI does it pretty well, maybe not as good as a human, but it does it in a way that's consistent and it doesn't get tired. And so it can reach out to a lot more people. It has much better results and conversions because it does the thing that humans don't really want to do. But on the other hand of all of this, humans can now, to your point, move up the value chain and do more important things and maybe work more opportunities, work more leads. Their performance increases. So there's the value there. So basically, to the Luddites, we're saying this, and this is just like the 1900s, where the Luddites came in, and I think it was the 1900s, if I remember correctly, and the industrial revolutions. They came in and said, "Oh, these machines are going to replace us. It's terrible. We need to break all of them." The machines are not here to replace us. The machines are here to replace part of our work. Take the robot out of the human. I love that phrase. That's genius, and can really lift everyone up. So with that, let's think about, do you have an example of an implementation of AI in an organization for, I don't know, a specific use case or a specific project that went really well, that was in the 5%, not the 95% for McKinsey, that was in the 5%. And can you share that and also some learnings off of that that people can take away?
Yeah, so the previous role I was in, so I headed up the data analytics and AI for a large fintech company. One of the pain points that we had was in the commercial organization, you would have to put together effectively an escalation to bring all the information together with respect to a prospective contract that you wanted signed in order to escalate it to senior management. And senior management would want to know all the usual things. So are they an existing client? Are they or not? And if they're an existing client, what's the history that we've had with them? Are there any major outages or tickets that have been open? From a usage perspective, have we had fewer people using it more often, more people using it more often? Like what's happened? How has the contract kind of evolved over time? And then from a sales perspective, how do we get to this point? So what were the interactions? What meetings do we have? Have they downloaded different white papers? Have they come to different events? Client 360 to understand the the holistic picture associated with how do we get to this point. And then also some comparables to understand how does this contract compare to other existing clients that you perceive to be comparable, to make sure that it's being kind of priced appropriately. And then is there other pertinent information about the organization itself with respect to their expansions or contractions or acquisitions or anything like that is pertinent. So a lot of information, and salespeople would spend quite a lot of time pulling all that information together in order to prepare this escalation. And so the pain point that was given to us was a number of these salespeople came to us and said, there's got to be a better way. It's already quite manual, and we want to spend more time selling and not as much time doing the admin. So what we did,
what they always say.
exactly, which is what everyone wants. So we did exactly as I described. So in that case, we used what's called a RAG LLM. So it's a smart way of taking all the core information and putting it into one language model, and then in a relatively clever way, making sure that you're pulling the information from the right place, and then consolidating it and presenting it back. And in our case, we already knew what format it needed to be presented back in. It was the escalations. So the escalation was normally in email format, and there might be appendices, whether it be a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint with multiple slides and appendices and supporting information. So we already knew what good looked like. And so we started doing this in parallel. So we implemented this Client 360 escalation tool. We put it in parallel. So some of the salespeople started using it. And that in turn allowed us to do a lot of what's called kind of human in the loop reinforcement learning. So we could see where it was doing well, where it was not doing so well, where it was wording it appropriately. And it also added an interesting kind of, I suppose, pressure point, because the salespeople that weren't on the trial with us started seeing that their counterparts could get through these escalations very quickly with consistently high quality as well, which is a great thing to kind of build up. When I talked before about the coalition of the willing, the kind of next best thing is you have the people within the project that are achieving the success from the project and getting some of their time back, and they in turn are attracting other people to the project. So we just kept on expanding the project. And the rollout for that was pretty seamless. There was lots of really good feedback. One of the things we did note was when we were trying to figure out what good looks like, there was a degree of discrepancy and variability associated with how the different salespeople in the different products and the different regions did escalations. So another benefit that we saw was that the quality of the escalations overall improved and also reduced to a point where they were very consistent. Like one really good salesperson always did them, as opposed to a good one or a bad one or a not so good one. So we got great buy-in from that. Again, the technology was pretty sound, pretty robust. We still did have kind of reinforced the notion that it's a tool for salespeople to use, so they had to have accountability for the end result. So it's one of those ones where you kind of, what is it? In God we trust. Everyone else has to bring data.
Yeah.
So it still remains the salesperson's responsibility to ensure that what they are saying in the email that's coming from them is actually true and accurate. So spot checking it, which is great for us from a kind of QA, built-in QA perspective, and also reinforcing to the salesperson that we've just given you a tool, a really useful tool, but it doesn't replace the autonomy that you have, nor does it replace the decision-making that you need to apply. So based on all the information that's being brought together, you might look at the write-up and want to tweak it slightly to make it more digestible, or you think some of the information is a little bit erroneous, you might want to check it. So yeah, it was a nice way of reinforcing to the salespeople, we're giving you a tool that will augment your productivity because we want you to spend more time selling, but we also don't want you to feel like you're abdicating responsibility for it. This is still ultimately your accountability for getting it right.
That last part is really, really important. Is, you can't just go and say, well, the AI did it, the tool did it. If an executive sees it and then, the salesperson in front of them says, well, you wrote here that the customer does this and this. The salesperson can't come back and say, well, the AI generated this thing. I don't know what it generated. They have to have full responsibility. They are the ones submitting. AI wrote it for them, but they need to be familiar with every single thing and they need to validate it. Avoid the situations, just like we've heard of all these cases where lawyers used AI to write their briefs and then, it quotes things that don't exist and things like that. So the responsibility here is with the human. And I think it's really important that they remember that. You mentioned it saves them time. You mentioned it improves consistency so that you're essentially getting the results of like what would a really good salesperson write, and then instead of variance there. Did it improve the actual results of approving these deals in the
Yeah.
sense that like higher approval rate or better decisions? Like did it also result in that, or was it just productivity?
Yeah, it was. It did. Well, there were a couple of things. There were a couple of benefits, and there was one drawback as well. So the benefits were when the AI is kind of looking at the comparables to look at what are the other clients that are of similar size, that are using the product in a similar manner, that are in a similar segment or subsegment or geographic. It's very easy to kind of scale up from that to give a lot of comparables, so you can see what price existing clients are at versus kind of the price book that you have. So that was good. The second thing was the consistency was something that was noted. So senior managers were approving it in a more timely manner. The only drawback, which is an interesting one, was one of the comments that was made to us by one of the senior managers was previously they could tell by the escalation kind of the quality of the salesperson with respect to how thorough they had been, how consistent kind of the thought process was, how they had pitched kind of the strategy for we want to price it at this and it might move to this and this is why we should go for a 3-year contract in this regard. So in some way it kind of removed the kind of personal human element where this senior manager in particular, which we didn't fully appreciate at the time, was saying, now how do I get a feel for which salespeople are kind of at the top of their game versus the ones that are not at the top of the game? So how do I identify the training needs, and how can I point to the ones that are really good and say, be more like John or Sally when everything kind of converges to everyone's good?
Yeah.
That was interesting. And we did come up some ideas for how to deal with that, but it was one of those things that we hadn't really considered when we were devising the solution.
That I would not have thought of that either, but it makes sense. You always want to evaluate salespeople, and you evaluate based on their output, the documentation they produce, et cetera. And then you're like, okay, how do I evaluate them if AI generates the output? Any listeners who use Gong probably will be like, Gong is the way to do it. Gong is a very successful company that basically listens to all the sales calls, all the emails, et cetera, and helps you train your salespeople better. And part of it is also it flushes out the salespeople that are not as good. So maybe that's a way to deal with it versus the output. But I would not have thought about that at the outset.
Well, the great thing about the solution that we built, so once you kind of build the foundational element of having this kind of RAG-based LLM, where it's already pulling in a lot of the data that you need, the ability to pull in call transcripts or emails is actually relatively trivial. And you already kind of need to do it if you're doing some sort of chronological summary with respect to the interactions we've had and so forth. So we built a coaching tool off the back of that. So we did look at Gong, and there's a few other tools as well. But we effectively just built a small coaching tool. So it provided feedback to salespeople and also their manager with respect to the email correspondence and also the calls that they were having, kind of based on template or a structure of what we anticipated was best practice. And that was pretty interesting. So again, it was one of those ones where we talked to some of the senior managers about the need for coaching and mentoring and some of the things we could do. And we realized we already had kind of an adjacent solution that we could potentially leverage. And we did it in a relatively delicate way because we weren't immediately sure how will the salespeople respond to this. But the way it was done, like the organization's pretty forward thinking, and they're quite people focused as well. So it was done in a way of how do we improve it so that you can have a high conversion rate and have more sales and get a better commission and those types of things, as opposed to how are we going to use this as a weapon to kind of beat you with. So that certainly helps. But it was a really good example of where when you start getting some of the foundational elements in place, like when you start getting the data and when you've got some of the core infrastructure in place, then it becomes incrementally easier to roll out additional kind of these AI type projects, as opposed to trying to build them from scratch. And as you say, there's some phenomenal third-party apps as well that you can subscribe to that give you a lot of those benefits. We just happened to we were a relatively large organization, and we liked kind of building some of the stuff ourselves, which is quite fun. And it also helped for a slightly tighter coupling of the solution as well.
Yeah, that it's great that you ended up building another thing on top of that since you were working with the data anyway, and the human element is really important. How do you deliver this to them, and how do they? Because if I was a salesperson and I thought, okay, the first thing was useful because it saved me a lot of time and got more deals across the line, but behind the scenes you were using that to evaluate my performance as a salesperson, then I would be like, do I really want to use that thing? But if you handle it in the right way, it makes sense. What didn't work in that project? What through that project you're like, okay, we thought this and that didn't work, or we tried to do this and that didn't work. And there are learnings out of that. Were there any failures or heartbreaks in that?
Yeah, I think there's always a natural tendency when you're building those types of solutions to make sure you've got perfect data. And part of my role was head of data. So it's easy to put off those types of projects and say, we should do it once and do it properly once we have all the data in place that we need and we've got confidence in the data. What we actually found, and we did that for a little while, we started working on the data. There were lots of data cleansing and data migration projects. And then we did a small version of the project. And we had 4 or 5 salespeople that were involved. And what we realized quite quickly was by accepting the fact that the data wasn't perfect and building the solution, we effectively started to crowdsource the quality of the data. So by surfacing it in a way where salespeople that understood the data best could actually look at it and go, hang on a minute, this says that they've been a client for 3 years. They haven't been a client for 3 years. They've been here at least like 7 years. What it did is it started to give us much greater insight into some of the data quality issues, like thematic data quality issues, where if we migrated from Sugar to Salesforce and some of the IDs didn't cut over properly, so there were some issues with respect to the tenure because it was only looking at the Salesforce, not looking at the historical system as well. So the learning we took from that was we should have started it earlier. So even when the data wasn't perfect, the benefit that we were providing created an environment where the people that were working on the project with us were accepting of the fact that it's not going to be perfect, but they could see the benefit that could be derived. And it was almost like the price they paid in part to say, we'll give you some feedback on some of these data quality issues, knowing that once you've got those resolved, the end result is going to be great from the fact that data's all right, but also great from the efficiency and the admin that you're taking away from me. So that was one of the learnings. We should have started earlier. And so starting with a small wedge and then expanding it out worked well, but we could have started earlier and we didn't have to spend as much time making the data perfect because we would have got that anyway from effectively crowdsourcing the
what I hear a lot, and I'm pretty sure I saw this on your post too, is garbage in, garbage out. Like people saying, oh, you can't do AI until your data is clean and perfect because otherwise it's going to be just garbage. And then there was one contrarian voice to this, a guy called Ben Stencil, who said, well, ChatGPT was trained on Reddit, which is full of garbage, and somehow it works. So are you saying the garbage in, garbage out, maybe, we're taking it to the extreme and we should like get started and work through the data quality on the way, or what are you saying?
Yeah, so I'm saying wherever you are with respect to your data maturity journey. So if you have absolutely flawless data and you've invested in it for the last 20 years and you've got data lineage and data governance and data change boards and everything else, then you are in a phenomenal place to leverage that strong foundation you've got. If you've got data which is kind of not perfect and it's got things wrong with it, then that's not stopping you from doing AI projects and leveraging that data. You can still make good progress. If you are unfortunate to have lots of siloed systems and you just don't have a clear view of the data and you don't really have a single source of the truth, then that might be problematic for you. You probably do have to spend a little bit of maintenance kind of housekeeping to get it to a point where it's at least reasonable enough for you to do something with. But certainly you don't need perfect data. It needs to be okay, but it doesn't need to be perfect. And I find the same thing with, we did a whole bunch of Power BI reports. We were at Microsoft shops. We loved Power BI. And what we found is the organization itself acquired like 40 different companies over a relatively short space of time. And we were stitching together disparate systems, whether it be ticketing systems or CRM systems or billing systems. And what we found is the more reports that we did, the more, again, that we crowdsourced the QA so that the people that understood the data the best, was seeing the data and could flag those issues with us, as opposed to us trying to second some of the people onto our team so we could fix the data to such a degree that we had absolute confidence in it. And so again, we kind of took the same approach. So we developed kind of this Power BI suite of reports looking at different things, acknowledging there might be some differences, and then providing a feedback loop where it was super quick and easy for people to say, hey, I noticed there's an issue. And we did something about it, like we validated, oh, look, we've found that now. And it was a huge help. And so it also kind of culturally, it was a nice reinforcement of the fact that as kind of the data stewards, we're not always going to get it right. And we do rely on people to do some of the sanity checks. So as opposed to being kind of this lofty ivory tower that's churning out reports and not really wanting to change them or talk to people about them, we were kind of the reverse. We were like, hey, we'll develop some of those reports, and we'd love to get your feedback. If you think the data's got some issues, then let us know. We'll look at the underlying issues, fix it up. You think the format could be better. So the greatest kind of thrill that we got as a team was if our data and our insights affected change. Like if someone said, and we've made a decision, it was based on a report we did or some insights that we produced, that's heaven for an analyst. So that's what we wanted. And the easiest way we found to do that is to make sure that we had really strong two-way dialogue, and that the clients that we were dealing with were clear that the outcome that we wanted was the outcome that they wanted. Like, we wanted them to have absolute confidence and trust in the data, which meant that we would be willing to bend over backwards to make sure that if they thought there was an issue, we would fix that issue so they could have absolute confidence in that data.
There's a lot of humility in that approach, right? Of not being the ivory tower, of saying, listen, what we're doing here is not perfect, but we want to work with you and we want to get your feedback, versus saying, okay, we built this, here's the dashboard, here's a report, go and use it, and you're stuck with it, kind of thing. That humility that was involved here, I think, was really important in building that relationship. So if you take that to the extreme, your users might at some point say, well, we're not your QA. We're not your testers. We're not going to spend our days testing your work. You need to test your work. But your point was also, well, we don't know everything and we need your help. How did you handle that relationship? Because I think obviously it's relevant in the data space, but also generally in AI, because no AI that comes out is going to be perfect. You need to prepare your users for the potential mistakes and errors. But how do you build that buy-in, that relationship where they are okay doing some of the QA for you and okay investing extra effort for you?
Yeah, I think there's a few things to unpack there. So first of all, all data is biased, all data.
Mhm.
So the very fact that someone made a determination of what to collect and what not to collect means that whatever you're collecting is biased. And what's interesting, there's a great quote that says, the map isn't the terrain. So all data we have is like an artificial representation of reality.
Mhm.
And so I think, so you are right in the sense that you don't want to be giving absolute rubbish to the end user in a way suggesting that their time is less valuable than your own, and it's up to them to kind of fix it. But at the same time, often end users will want something kind of sooner rather than later, and they'll be willing to invest a little bit of time in making sure that the creation of that report is one where it's a collaborative type approach, where the structure of what they want, we propose, the raw information we bring in, and maybe there's a spreadsheet they currently use, or there's some Looker reports or something else that we're replacing. So what we want to show them is that we want to either replace what they've got and make it better, or give them something they don't currently have. But it is a journey. Like, part of it is us understanding what they need. And there really are two ways of doing it. You can waterfall it and spend lots of time writing specifications and auditing the raw data, and which is good, which works. But invariably, data does change. So even if you spend all that time doing that, then over time, that data might change. And if you've already built kind of the culture of, we build it once and then throw it over the fence and then just run, and then the data changes, or you make another acquisition and the exchange rate changes, or the way they do the exchange rate changes, or the dates, or anything like that, then if you haven't already built the kind of the muscle of what we're building is a joint thing where we'll give you something which we know is going to be good, and we will test it to make sure it's as good as we can make it. But we do want to collaborate with you going forward. So if you do see things that could be improved, or if you think there are some data quality issues that are creeping in, we want you to not have to think twice about if that gets escalated to us or not. So yeah, so I think you're right. There is a responsibility that we have to make sure that we are providing them with the data so it's not wasting their time. And I think the trust element there comes from if the type of issues they're seeing suggests that we're just not listening and they're flagging up the same types of issues all the time, then that's a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
If it's simple stuff that we should have picked up ourselves, that's definitely like we should be having our own kind of exception reporting. We should be doing our own kind of boundary test to make sure there's no negative values where there shouldn't be, or if there's any large jumps of more than a certain percentage, maybe that gets flagged for us. One of the classic examples is sometimes the underlying system might not have updated in time. So it could be a whole day's missing, all the way the year to date or month to date is being calculated has been done incorrectly. So you're right, there's lots of things that we need to take responsibility for. Suggestion I'm making is that if we extend that to the clients so that it does feel like it's a joint project, then again, you've got pretty good buy-in and you've kind of got this culture of they'll flag things up to you and you in turn will keep in contact with them as well.
A lot of human management here, I think, is what we're taking away. Going back to your comment from earlier in this episode, it's the technology is there. The technology probably is not going to be the thing that causes this to fail. It's the humans. You need to work on the projects they care about. You need to get their buy-in. You need to show them how you're saving them time. You need to show them how you're improving their results. You need to bring them into the fold. You need to have a good relationship and say, okay, I'm not going to get it always right, but I'm going to fix whatever you come back with. Like, it's the theme through the last 45 minutes or so is the human element is so important. And as a leader, you need to communicate and get the buy-in of these other groups and work correctly with them. I think that's really, really important. And it sort of cuts through the hype, because a lot of hype is technology and this organization did that, and here's a new project that we launched. But behind the scenes, I don't think people are talking enough about it, and we not realizing enough is the human part, and that human part is so important organizationally. We're almost at the end of our time, so we're going to switch to a little lightning round, I call it. It's a lightning round. I'm going to ask you 4 questions, and for each question, I would like you to try not to think too much, just answer, and then I'll ask you why that was your answer, okay? So we'll start easy. AI tool you can't live without.
Oh, I'm going to go Otter.
Interesting. Why? And by the way, if you don't mind saying what Otter is for those
so Otter is, it's a transcription. So it does the transcription. So I love being present in meetings, and I find sometimes when I write notes, I feel like I'm still present in the meeting. But if I have a laptop and I'm like typing, then I feel a degree of disconnection with the person that I'm speaking to, even if I'm scribbling on a piece of paper. So my preferred approach is when I'm present with someone, I'm present with that person. And then obviously with their permission, if we're recording the discussion that's going on, and then afterwards we can produce the minutes and the actions and the decisions and whatever else, and it doesn't distract from the meeting at the time, it's perfect. And the other thing I love about it is if you live your whole life in Otter, so performance reviews is a great idea. I have one-on-ones with my team every week. And then over a 3-month period, because we do quarterly OKRs and quarterly performance reviews, I can literally say to Otter, let's look at the last 3 months of my interactions with Yoni and see and kind of theme it up as to all the things that he did well, all the areas where we discussed there's growth or opportunities for personal development. And it just gives it to you all in one go. So Otter, love it. And there's lots of other tools that are pretty good. I started with Otter, and I'm brand loyal.
Amazing. Well, and you use Otter in face-to-face meetings too, or just Zoom, etc.?
Yeah, I'll do. So most of my meetings, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm in the office. So my face-to-face meetings often will have a Teams component. So you can join the Teams call, and you can use
Mm.
Gemini to the team stuff as well. So there's normally someone that's remote. So most of the calls, even if they're face to face, will be like that. Most of the team face to face when we do one-on-ones, but we can record some of those conversations as well. And then when you've got the remote ones, it just plugs in as a little joins the call.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Yeah, I obviously use it a lot on Zoom. The face-to-face ones is where I haven't had a lot of experience with, and I should try. Um, an AI myth you'd bust in one sentence.
Ooh, an AI myth. It would probably be the failure rate. Like AI is really easy to implement. Like it really is. And so the myth I would bust would be that AI is hard. It's not hard. Like if vendors have a real product and know what they're doing, AI is easy. If consultants have done it before, AI is easy. If the team has done it before, AI is really easy. So AI is not hard. It's if you don't know what you're doing, it's really hard. Like if I went into a Michelin star restaurant and tried to cook something, I mean, I can make a few things, but if you wanted me to make the 2-star meal, I would struggle. Really good chefs, they would not struggle. So if you're talking to a vendor and they say AI is hard, find one that thinks it's easy, that actually thinks it's easy, not just pretends that it's easy. AI is not hard at all.
I love that. Okay, that's unique. So far, your answers are really unique. Favorite book, podcast, or resource for builders?
Oh, for builders, I love, so you can probably see it in my very messy background, I love the Lean Startup. There's an old school book that I'm going to go for, which is Charles Handy, The Empty Raincoat. This is a really old book. This will date me a little bit. But Charles Handy was the first person that kind of argued for federated organizations. So the notion in the good old days, the notion was that an organization should be this kind of blobby, amorphous thing. And Charles Handy kind of argued for federated in the sense that you should have these disparate, not siloed, but separate autonomous units that work together with each other. So you have a finance function and you have a marketing function and you have a sales function and so forth. And it also works with when you've acquired through all the different divisions. And a really good example of this, which I think is really applicable, is AI teams and kind of data and analytics team. So there's a really interesting argument to say, if you want to make progress with AI, you should just set up like a brand new department and stick it over in the corner. And Charles Handy would kind of say, that's not quite how it works. Like the way of introducing new tools, new ways of thinking, is to, instead of building a little separate siloed ivory tower, it's to instill that in all the teams you currently have. So an example would be when the internet came along or when email came along, you didn't have a chief email officer or a chief internet officer. What you did is you instilled in all the teams the fact that you now have this new tool at your disposal. So now marketing, instead of doing all their mail outs, had a new tool called email marketing. So the same with AI. So you could set up a separate little AI thing to look at things and figure out how the AI office can help, or you could instill in the CMO and the CRO and the CFO, hey, AI is this new thing and it's your responsibility. You know your role best. You are in the best position to understand how you can leverage this new tool set to help you be more effective in your role. So yeah, so Charles Handy, Empty Raincoat. It's probably from the 70s, and I wasn't alive then. But it's an old book, but it's a good one. And then Lean Startup, because that's pretty applicable for today as well.
Yeah, I see a lot of organizations with a VP of AI or an AI center of excellence or something like that.
It is a double-edged sword. Like there's some organizations where it makes sense, where especially when there's high degree of governance and IP and other things as well. But for most organizations, you don't need a separate team. You just need the people in their current roles to be empowered to use AI in a way that they can use it best, as opposed to having a separate kind of accountable thing that starts blurring the lines as to who's actually in charge of demand gen. If you've got an AI team that's doing all the outbound emails and you've got a market team going, I don't know what emails you've done, but they look okay, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And this connects them. One prediction for AI in the next 5 years.
One prediction. I mean, it's too easy to do the hype bubble because
Yeah.
it's not really a prediction when it's guaranteed. Prediction for AI.
This is a lightning round.
Yeah, well, you got me really thinking now. I think the main thing for me would be the fact that we're just scratching the surface. So 5 years is a long time. So if I think about the last 3 years, well, the last 5 years, everything's changed. So you've got COVID, and then suddenly remote work was a thing, and everyone accepted you could do that. Whereas before, people were like, oh, if you work remotely, then you'll take a second job and you'll try and exploit both employers. So a lot changes in 5 years. I think in 5 years' time, it'll be unrecognizable how we use AI. I think the prediction will be there will be lots of ways it's just invisible, and it makes every element of our life better. And we'll still be having the fight over the hype as well.
Yeah. Still going to be a hype in 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Glenn, this has been very, very interesting. First of all, for the listeners, so as I mentioned in the beginning, go find Glenn on LinkedIn and follow him, because you're going to get a lot more insights, just like what we had over the last 45 minutes or so. And if you haven't subscribed or liked or thumbs up or whatever it is on the platform that you're currently listening to, please do that as well. Subscribe to this podcast, like this episode. Really appreciate it. And Glenn, thank you very, very much for your time. This was an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
My pleasure. It's been fun.
Thank you. Okay.